Welcome back, everyone. My name is Omar, the creator of blackastrology.com. One of the things I want to talk about today is one of the more complex portions of astrology, aspects, and how they play a role in understanding your chart, other people's chart, and transits. So let's get to it. When we talk about aspects in astrology, what we're really trying to understand is how the planetary energies work together. And in astrology, there are 5 major aspects. There are conjunctions, squares, oppositions, trines, and sextiles. There are other minor aspects, but that's more for a topic for a later discussion. Just briefly, what are aspects? Aspects are essentially how planetary energies interact with you. What that means is if you're looking at a specific planet, imagine it's giving off a radio signal that's coming straight to you. Your body is receiving this radio signal. But we know that the solar system contains more than just one planet. So you have all these other planets interacting, all these other planets giving off radio signals at the same time that your body, a giant antenna, is receiving. So to simplify it a little bit, what we're talking about is the relationship of the energies and how a specific aspect interacts with you, how that interaction manifests itself in either a physical or mental or emotional sense. On a more basic level, let's think of the energies from the moon. In a previous video, I did explain how the moon has an effect on our emotional body. But what's happening is the moon's energy, right, or gravitational pull, which is a type of energy, has an effect on us. The same thing can be said about Saturn or Mars or the sun. Those gravitational effects have energies that affect our day-to-day. Aspects are essentially energies from these different planets and how they interact with each other. For example, if Mars has its own energy, Saturn has its own energy, and they are in aspect, and we'll get into that in a little bit, if their aspect combines their energies, that's how it will affect you. So the first aspect that we'll focus on are conjunctions.
Conjunction, junction, how's that function?
Conjunctions are essentially a blending of energies or a blending of planetary energies. One of the key words for conjunctions is power. Essentially, it's the uniting of multiple planets, 2 or more. Using these conjunctions and the energies from the conjunction, the person can actually use that energy to push forward through their chart. A conjunction occurs when planets are within, say, 8 degrees of each other. This means that they are approaching each other and then essentially become aligned. They are conjunct, meaning they are together. That aspect represents a union of energies, and that union of energies has a specific physical manifestation or mental manifestation. Similar to the Great Conjunction that's happening in a few days, and I just spoke about that in a recent video, and I'll drop a link to that as well. But essentially what's happening in the conjunction is a union. And when we think about the union, just like any other union, it can be positive or negative depending on the planets involved. Because the conjunction is a union between 2 or more planets, the conjunction itself isn't always bad or good. It depends on the planets that are coming together. If one planet is not well aligned with the other, then the conjunction may be a bit more difficult. Typically with conjunctions, it's hard to discern which energies are at play because the energies become so blended together, it's hard to separate which one is actually working at that moment. The second aspect that I want to touch on is squares. Typically, in the astrological community, squares can be seen as a negative aspect. But what I want to say is that where there's an obstacle, there's an opportunity. Squares represent an internal struggle or an internal dialogue and tension that's occurring within the person. A square represents a 90-degree aspect between two different planets. And because this 90-degree aspect is inharmonious to the way the energies react with each other, or to the ways the wavelengths interact with each other, it represents itself as a form of tension or difficulty within the person. And when we're talking about squares, what we're really discussing is a sense of struggle within the person. It represents a sense of a conversation that's happening internally where two things are at odds. So one thing to think about the square is when you're looking at ways to resolve the square, ways to resolve the tension, you have to consider the two planets, and each of them separately will provide you a solution. If you made it this far in the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and let's get right back to it. The third aspect that we're going to talk about is the opposition. The opposition represents two planets opposite each other, meaning they are roughly 180 degrees opposing each other in your astrological chart. Oppositions present another set of obstacles. However, unlike the square, this dialogue or this tension that's happening is not necessarily internal, but it involves the outside world. It involves other people or something outside of you. So again, like a square where there's obstacle, there's opportunity. The opposition teaches us to learn balance. It teaches us to understand ourselves with respect to the outside world, understanding ourselves with respect to other people. The opposition is about coming to terms that we need to find more balance. The key word for opposition is awareness. It really helps you to focus and be aware of creating balance, creating compromise, finding a solution, and coming in the middle. An example of an opposition would be Mars opposite Saturn. What could that mean? That means the energy of Mars, the initial spark or the entrepreneurial spirit of Mars, the warrior, the starter, the trailblazer of Mars is opposite Saturn, the more restrictive planet, the planet of discipline, the planet of structure and balance and limitation. When those two planets are in opposition, you'll see that there's a struggle between wanting to start something and then holding back. Oppositions similar to that are really teaching about balance. And when we look at those two planets, we have to find the fine line in the middle where both of these planets can exist. So oppositions, again, teach balance, they teach compromise. The fourth aspect I want to touch on are the trines. These aspects are formed when a planet is within 120 degrees of each other. The key words for these planets are creation and harmony. What this means is that the trine is a favorable aspect within a chart. Again, like I mentioned with the square and the opposition, they provide obstacles. The trine doesn't necessarily create any obstacles. What they do is they present you with things that you can be naturally good at. Things that you don't necessarily have to think about doing, they kind of just occur. It's always good to have trines in your chart. They make life a little bit easier. Now, the fifth aspect I want to touch on is the sextile, which is formed when planets are 60 degrees apart. This is another favorable aspect to have in your chart. The sextile provides opportunity. These are opportunities that you have to work for. They're there, but you have to take them. Similar to, let's say, playing lotto. You can't win the lotto unless you actually buy a ticket.
And the Mondo Ball number is 21.
Grandma, you okay, boy? We won the lottery. We won!
One thing to note is if you come across a chart that has plenty of squares or oppositions, that's not necessarily anything to panic about. In fact, it's often said that a person with plenty of squares and oppositions is an older soul, right? They've been at this a couple times and the universe is throwing obstacles their way so they can figure it out. Someone with very few squares and oppositions, someone with plenty of trines and sextiles, these people are sort of astrological infants. Their soul hasn't quite gotten to the point where they can be tested like another person. Think of it as grade school. Someone with plenty of trines and sextiles, no oppositions or squares, they're in middle school, right? They're going to the first, second, third grade. They're not getting hit with anything tough. But someone with plenty of squares and oppositions, well, they're in college. They're getting hit with all of the things at once and they have to figure it out. That's their lesson this time around. Whenever you see that in your chart, embrace the oppositions, embrace the squares. It might actually be more important to focus on the squares and oppositions than the trines and sextiles, because it's the squares and oppositions that will challenge you to learn more, challenge you to push yourself harder and learn, and that's where you find your lessons. So, how have you benefited from any harmonious aspects in your chart, trines and sextiles? And how have you worked through or learned from your squares and oppositions? How have you created opportunity from your obstacles? Let me know all of that in the comments. I hope this video was helpful. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay tuned for many more.